Imagine standing in the center of a nightmare. In front of you, across a narrow strip of scorched earth, 250,000 fresh warriors are screaming for your head, their spears blotting out the sun. You are outnumbered 6 to 1. You have no supplies, no path to retreat, and the nearest help is 1,000 miles away. Most generals would prepare for death. He didn't just build a wall to trap his enemies. This is the story of Alesia, the most insane engineering gamble in military history. By the end of this video, you will understand why the double wall wasn't a mistake, but a masterpiece of psychological execution that ended a 400-year-old threat in a single weekend. The king of the Gauls. Before we can understand the walls, we have to understand the man who forced Caesar's hand. To beat Caesar, he decided to starve him. He implemented a scorched earth policy. Eventually, Vercingetorix retreated to the hill fortress of Alesia. Caesar arrived at Alesia and immediately realized that a direct assault would be a massacre for his troops. He ordered his 50,000 legionaries to construct an 11-mile-long wall entirely encircling the city. This wasn't just a fence, it was a sophisticated killing machine. It featured 12-foot-high ramparts, towers every 80 feet, and 2 massive trenches. One trench was filled with diverted river water to create a moat, but the real horror lay in the hidden defenses. Caesar's men planted thousands of lilium-deep pits, with sharpened stakes at the bottom, covered with brush. They scattered stimuli-iron barbs, hidden in the grass, that would rip through a soldier's foot. For the Gauls inside Alesia, watching this wall rise was like watching their own coffin being built in real time. The news that changed everything as the first wall neared completion. Caesar received the news he dreaded. Vercingetorix had successfully sent out cavalry before the lines were closed. Relief force from every tribe in Gaul. 250,000 men were now marching toward Alesia. Caesar was no longer the hunter. He was about to become the prey. His officers urged him to retreat before the relief army arrived. If the Romans stayed, they would be crushed between the city walls and the approaching horde. It was a mathematical certainty of defeat, but Caesar knew that retreating meant losing Gaul forever. He made a decision that sounds like madness. He ordered his men to turn around and build another wall, facing the opposite direction. The human sandwiched this second wall. The circumvallation was 13 miles long. It mirrored the first, facing outward toward the approaching 250,000 Gauls. Caesar was now literally living in a donut of wood and earth. His army was packed into a narrow corridor between 2 defensive lines. They had to defend the inner ring from Vercingetorix and the outer ring from the relief force. Think about the psychological pressure. Every direction was the front line. This turned the Roman legion into a pressurized spring. By removing the option of flight, Caesar forced his men into a state of absolute, lethal focus. Vercingetorix had 80,000 soldiers and thousands of civilians, but very little food to save supplies for his warriors. He made the cold-blooded decision to expel the useless mouths. The women, children, and elderly. They were pushed out of the city gates toward the Roman lines, hoping Caesar would let them through. 4 days, thousands of innocent people sat in the no-man's land between the city walls and the Roman trenches, slowly starving to death as both sides watched. This psychological horror served Caesar's purpose. It showed the Gauls that he was more merciless than the famine they feared. For 3 days, the Gauls launched wave after wave against the outer Roman wall. Simultaneously, Vercingetorix's forces surged from the city to strike the inner wall. The Romans were fighting back to back. At one point, a Gallic force identified a weak spot in the outer wall, a steep hill where the fortifications couldn't be completed perfectly. 60,000 elite Gallic warriors launched a massive assault on this gap. The Roman line began to buckle. He put on his famous bright red cloak so every soldier on the field could see him and rode directly into the chaos. The sight of their commander fighting in the dirt galvanized the exhausted Romans. The 250,000-man relief army, the invincible horde, vanished into the woods, leaving Vercingetorix alone. He had proven that engineering and discipline could overcome any number of enemies. If he had chosen to retreat, Rome likely would have collapsed under Gallic invasions decades later. By building a prison for himself, he created the blueprint for the Roman Empire's expansion. But how Caesar convinced 50,000 men to stay inside them when death seemed certain. He understood that when you take away a man's exit, you give him a reason to fight like a god. So, if you were a Roman soldier standing in that narrow corridor, watching 250,000 enemies scream toward you, would you have trusted Caesar's math, or would you have run? Let me know in the comments if you think Caesar was a tactical genius or just the luckiest man in history. If you want to see how he used these same soldiers to take over Rome itself, watch our breakdown of the crossing of the Rubicon next.